Good evening, good evening.
Hello.
We are here to talk about, what's the name of that holiday again? Hanukkah. The 8 days of Hanukkah. Hanukkah, the word itself, there's a Hebrew word, and it means rededication, renewal. It also means resting, like at the end of a war, and you enter into a restful, peaceful time. So it was two things. It was the renewal of the temple. They rededicated the temple, they cleaned it up after it was defiled by the Hellenists. And it was also a time when the war was over and they could relax. It was actually a year later. The observance of Hanukkah began a year after the events of Hanukkah. Not that same year. Partly because too many people were still grieving the losses during the war. So it was not a time to create a celebration yet. The next year, when they looked back at the war and realized what a miraculous victory it was, then they proclaimed those 8 days as a celebration. Why 8 days? Because of the miracle of the oil, not the war. We mention in our prayers during these 8 days, we mention the miracle of the war, thanking God for making the few victorious over the many, the weak over the strong. But what we celebrate is the lighting of the menorah. And that is the miracle that the little bit of oil that they found that had not been contaminated, which was enough only for one night, miraculously lasted 8 nights. And so we celebrate 8 nights of lighting the candles. That itself is instructive and inspiring. The military victory was awesome. The Jews were only a handful, the family of the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees. They were fighting basically with sticks. And who were they fighting? An army that had war elephants. Very trained army, a very big army. And they were able to expel them from the Holy Land. Great miracle. And yet, we mention it, of course, and we have to thank God for miracles. You can't be ungrateful. But what do we really celebrate? What is the main theme of Hanukkah? The lighting of the menorah. The miracle that the oil lasted 8 days. If there was some way to compare miracles, like what's a big miracle and what's not such a big miracle, I'm not sure. If it's miraculous, if it's supernatural, how do you measure this is more supernatural than the other supernatural? Hard to measure. But if we could, it would seem that this battle, which was a matter of life and death, and the victory of that battle should loom much bigger than we didn't have the clean oil, but we wanted to use clean oil, so we found a little bit of clean oil, but that little bit of clean oil lasted for 8 days until we got fresh, clean oil. That's not exactly life-saving or crucial for our survival. So why? Why are we celebrating the candles more than the military victory, which was a really dangerous threat? So here's what makes Hanukkah really special. We have holidays that celebrate certain very positive events. Purim, for example, we were threatened with annihilation, God forbid, because Haman just wanted to kill the entire Jewish people. He didn't care whether you were observant, not observant, religious, non-religious. In fact, he didn't really care whether you were really Jewish. If you identified as a Jew, he was ready to kill you. He just didn't want Jews in the world anymore. Pure genocide, like the Nazis. If you had any Jewish blood in you at all, he had to kill you. Well, we survived that miraculously. We were able to eliminate our enemy, and not a single Jew died. That's like miracle upon miracle. Not only did we win, but the victory was supernatural. No one died on our side. So we have that holiday, and we celebrate the fact that we cannot be destroyed as a people. Hitler tried the same thing. Do we need another holiday to celebrate the victory over the Nazis? No, because we already have Purim. We already know that we can survive attempts at genocide. So when we celebrate Purim, we're also celebrating the victory over the Nazis. If we had to make another holiday every time we survived a threat, we wouldn't have time to go to work. We also have a holiday that celebrates our victory over slavery, enslavement. In Egypt, Pharaoh didn't want to destroy the Jewish people because that would ruin his whole economy. He just wanted to enslave the Jews forever. Well, we were victorious in that endeavor as well. We were liberated, freed from that slavery in miraculous ways. 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea. So anytime another nation would want to enslave us or keep us trapped in their country, hostage, we don't need another holiday for that occasion. We already have Pesach. So what is Hanukkah? In the times of Hanukkah, no one was trying to wipe out the Jewish people. The Greeks didn't want to kill every Jew, only the leaders, because they refused to cooperate with their philosophy. So they really wanted to impose their way of thinking, their way of believing, their religion onto the Jews of Israel. Of course, it ended up being a physical battle, but that battle also was not to wipe out Jews. It was only to install authority of the Greek Assyrians so that they could control the lifestyle in Israel. which they called Hellenism, the worship of the human body, of the human mind, the worship of a human being. So what really is the victory that we celebrate on Hanukkah? It's not freedom from slavery. It's not survival against genocidal attempts. So what is it? It's the ability to maintain a purely Jewish, unadulterated, undefiled belief and way of life. Or in simple language, the ability to stay innocent. The invasion of the Hellenists, of the Assyrian Greeks, was to some degree a loss of innocence, because Jews bought into it. Many Jews had become Hellenists. In fact, some Jews became the leaders among the Hellenists, trying to impose it on their fellow Jews, just like many Jews became leaders of the Communist Party in Russia, the Soviet Union. So it was really an attempt to rob us of our innocence, to inject into Jewish belief some non-Jewish concepts. In other words, corruption. Corruption of our values, corruption of our beliefs. And what they said was this: we have nothing against Jews being Jewish. We have nothing against Jews being religious. Of course, keep your Shabbos, keep your mitzvahs, keep your culture, very important. But can you stop attributing it to God? Take credit for it yourself. Jews are very smart people. They came up with this Bible. They came up with this scroll. It's beautiful. It's moral. It's noble. Hats off to you. But why do you keep saying God? You're worshiping God. You're doing this for God. Don't do that. That's insulting to the human being. That's Hellenism. Hellenism basically says human beings are the greatest creations in the whole world, and we should take credit. And we should celebrate ourselves, our humanness. And there's a lot to celebrate. Human beings are incredible beings. So what they were saying is, study the Torah, but stop calling it God's Torah. Keep the mitzvahs, but don't say it's God's mitzvahs. It sounds infantile. They're your mitzvahs. You came up with it. Your sages, your brilliant minds, you invented this incredibly noble, idealistic lifestyle. So take credit for it. That's all they wanted. They wanted us to worship secular humanism. Many Jews thought that was kind of harmless. But the Maccabees said Jews have a Jewish belief, a Jewish tradition, and a Torah that came from God at Mount Sinai. And we're not going to compromise that. And we're certainly not going to exchange it for some other philosophy. Of course, they were right. Hellenism died a long time ago. Today, whatever secular humanism there is, died on October 7th, when we discovered that the higher you go in secular education, the more anti-Semitic you become, which means you have no idea what morality means. So we see that is not a legitimate philosophy. It is not a legitimate culture. It's not a legitimate belief. And we were right to resist it, to refuse it, and to celebrate our survival of it. So in simple language, Hanukkah is our national victory over infiltration of our beliefs and of our values. That we remained loyal to original and uniquely Jewish ideas, that's what we're celebrating on Hanukkah. The fact that we won the battle with the Egyptians too. And we won the battle with the Persians in Purim time. We have a holiday for that. The holiday of Hanukkah is the first and final time when we were threatened by contamination of our beliefs, we survived. And now anytime we face that same threat, we already have Hanukkah to celebrate our victory. So how do we celebrate it? You see, Purim, if you remember, Purim is celebrated to a large extent by eating and drinking. You have a special meal, you send food gifts, it's a mitzvah to have a few drinks. It is celebrated in a very physical and human observance of gifts to the poor, food exchanged with each other, big meals, and of course, latkes. I'm sorry, Hamantaschen. Hanukkah, on the other hand, is celebrated by lighting candles, which is kind of spiritual. Particularly since the light of those candles may not be used for any practical purposes. You can't read by that light or sew by that light, which is one of the reasons we have the 9th candle, the one that we light the others with. While that is burning, if we should happen to read near the menorah, we're reading to the light of the 9th candle, because the 8 candles of Hanukkah you may not use. They're holy, for holy purposes only. Now, we do eat latkes, but that's not the celebration. The reason we eat latkes is because it's made with oil, a lot of oil, very oily. And since the miracle of Hanukkah is the oil, so we eat a food made in oil, which means it's a pretty mystical and spiritual observance. It's not just for the food. The reason for it is Purim celebrates the survival of our body. Haman wanted to destroy us physically. Physically. The body survived that threat, so we celebrate by treating the body to some goodies, to some pleasures, eating and drinking. Hanukkah was not the survival of our bodies, it was the survival of our values. So it would be inappropriate to celebrate it by eating. So we celebrate it in a more spiritual way. And that's why we have this challenge, the Hanukkah challenge. For the 8 days of Hanukkah, we're going to be having a conversation each night in which we will look at another angle or another dimension of Hanukkah. And the challenge is to be able to apply each of those 8 values in your daily life. So you're invited to join us, of course. There's a link in the description and in the comments section for the times and the subjects and so on. So join us for the 8 nights of Hanukkah, where we squeeze the oil out of Hanukkah so that we can benefit from its message and from its inspiration. So we now know Hanukkah, unlike Purim, is a celebration of our soul, whereas Purim is a celebration of the body. Both are, of course, essential. But let's think for a minute. Of course, it's nice that we kept our own beliefs, that we kept our own faith, that we kept our own values. That's very good. That's what keeps us intact as a people. If you lose your culture, you lose your peoplehood. If you lose your culture, you lose your connection to each other. I was talking to some very secular Israelis, although that's kind of a contradiction in terms. You live in the Holy Land and you call yourself secular? But anyway, they consider themselves secular, and we were having this discussion about religious observance and if it's necessary and if it's... Anyway, at the end of the conversation, we were saying goodbye, and it was a week before Hanukkah, and all the secular Israelis leaving said, Chag Sameach. Happy holiday, because Hanukkah was coming. So I said, you just proved my argument. I was saying that every tradition is important because it keeps us together. It's what we have in common. It's what binds us. So here we're discussing, no, we don't agree. You're secular, I'm religious, you're physical, I'm spiritual, But in the final moments, when you're about to leave, you say, Chag Sameach. In other words, what do we have in common? The observance of Hanukkah. And even if you don't light the menorah on Hanukkah, the very fact that you know it's a Chag, you know it's a holiday, and we can exchange the blessing of happy holiday. But that's not all there is to it. Yes, it's important. It does keep us together. It does keep us motivated to remain Jewish because we know what it is to be Jewish. That's all good stuff. But there's something more to it, which we will talk about during Hanukkah at the Hanukkah Challenge. What's more is that there are certain cultures, cultural habits, behaviors that are a little degrading, and it reminds you of how human you are. I don't know, like Halloween, for example. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't see how you can call it a holy day. It hasn't been holy for a long time. But it's part of a culture. But it's not a culture to be proud of. It's like the drug culture. That's not culture. That's a slow suicide. How do you call that culture? That's the loss of culture, the corruption of culture. So there are cultures that happen to be true. This is how people have behaved for a long, long time. You eat these particular foods. They're really unhealthy, but that's what you used to eat, and so you're still eating it. Yeah, you can call it culture. But if it disappeared, it wouldn't be a bad thing. If you stopped eating those unhealthy foods, it wouldn't be so terrible. But then there's culture that ennobles, that lifts you, takes you to a place greater than human. So what is the difference between physical and spiritual? I don't even know what the word spiritual means. Soulful music is spiritual. It's good music. I think when we say spiritual, we mean when you are human and behave human and enjoy being human, then you are human. When you do things that are greater than human, when you try to be something more than human, that's spiritual. In the sense that it elevates you to a greater level of spirit. It doesn't add weight to your body. There is something in the human being that yearns to be more than human. And that's such an important feature that we ignore. We call it religious, we call it spiritual. We're not appreciating what it really is. There is this longing and this desire in the human being to be more than human. Not by dying and going to heaven. That's a bad idea. While on earth, in the body, we yearn to be more than human. And that's our nature, not nurture. Even if no one ever teaches you anything about religion, about God, about mitzvahs, commandments, every human being by nature has this desire, this need to be something more than human. If we don't know how to do that, we become desperate and we start looking in strange places because we don't know where to look, and we're thinking, maybe this will make me more than human. Like, for example, blow yourself up for the cause. Maybe that'll make me more than human. Maybe. It'll also make you dead, which is not a good idea. People try to be more than human by fasting, going without food for long periods of time. It's impressive. I'm in awe of people who can fast for 30 days in a row. I'm not sure it makes you more than human. It just pushes your human boundaries. What does make you more than human? If you transcend your needs and really feel for other people's needs. To be motivated by other people's needs, that is superhuman. To not be able to sleep because someone else is in trouble, that's miraculous. How does your nervous system respond to someone else's issue? How does that happen? How can you march by someone else's drum when you don't hear it? That is superhuman. Not that uncommon, because very often we are superhuman. We're constantly looking for it. We're constantly striving to be more than human, because that's what a human being is. To put it in psychological terms, every human being wants to be something more than human because they want credit. I can't take credit for being human. That's how I was created. To go through life just being human means I don't get any credit at all. If I want some credit, I have to do something that I was not born to do or born with. To become something more than human, that's up to me. That's my doing. That's my choice. If I succeed in becoming a little bit more than human, I have something to take credit for. If I simply remain a human, I can grow. I was a tiny human, now I'm a full-grown human. That's not a lot of credit. You're human. What are we supposed to do? Not grow? So, spiritual, although it's not the exact definition of the word, but we're using it in that sense. Spiritual means, what can I do that is more than human? Well, let's say honoring your parents is a little more than human. Not coveting, the 10th commandment, not coveting your neighbor's house, your neighbor's donkey, your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's husband. Not coveting, superhuman. Lighting the menorah is a celebration of those things that we do that are superhuman. When the Maccabees renewed the temple services after they were disrupted by the Hellenists, they had plenty of oil to light the menorah. But that oil had experienced death. The oil that was plentiful in the temple had been touched and used by people who were exposed to death. Death is unholy. Dead bodies are unholy. And so the oil was defiled. The oil should be a symbol of life, and here it came in contact with death, so it is defiled. When all oil is defiled as a result of war, and all the people have been exposed to death as well, you're allowed to use the defiled oil. You're allowed to. They could have used that oil without looking for that little cruse of oil hiding somewhere that was not defiled. But they wouldn't. That's superhuman. On a human level, you need to light the menorah, you have oil, use it. No one can tell the difference between defiled oil and undefiled. The oil looks the same, it burns the same, it smells the same, tastes the same. They wouldn't do it. Superhuman. They wanted to be something more than just human. So they said, no, we're not using imperfect oil. We're going to find the perfect oil, and with that we will light the menorah. So I guess the miracle was that they found the oil, even before it lasted for 8 days. There will always be oil that was not contaminated. There is always more to the human being than those parts of the human being that can be contaminated. That's why we have the ability to heal. Why can we recover from illness? Because illness only affects the external parts of our lives. It doesn't affect life itself. So our life heals our body. And that's why if you're optimistic, energetic, positive, you heal faster. So lighting the menorah really touches that part in us that would also refuse to use contaminated oil. We refuse to compromise. The oil is not perfect, so okay, we're not perfect either, and this is what happens. It's too bad, but that's the fact of life. So you might as well just get used to the fact that you're never going to be perfect, and it will never be perfect, and the oil doesn't have to be perfect, and just make the best of it. And something in us says, no, that's too human. It's sensible, but it's human sensible. Here's an opportunity to do something greater than human. Let's dig a little deeper to that part that cannot be contaminated, in the oil and in us. Were they justified in that assumption? Yes, they actually found a cruse of oil that was sealed by the high priest. It had never been touched. It will always be there if we search for it. That is the message of Hanukkah. Your true innocence can never be lost. The real Jew in you can never be compromised. It just doesn't react. It doesn't respond to anything that isn't Jewish. So if you introduce an idea that sounds really good, sounds logical, plausible, even enjoyable, but if it doesn't sound Jewish, that little piece of Jew in you that cannot be contaminated says, no, not for me. Not for me. And that's why we're still here, still Jewish, with the same mitzvot, the same Torah, the same values. Innocent. Innocent means non-corrupted. We'll talk more about this at the Hanukkah Challenge during the 8 days of Hanukkah. And you can join us by looking at the comments in the comment section. But just a little trivia here. You know what the word sincere means? If you look it up in the dictionary, it will tell you that the word sincere comes from the Latin, two words in Latin, sincera. Sin means without, and cera means wax. Sincere means without wax. How did that happen? Back in the olden days when they would make statues out of marble, the less expensive marble tended to flake. As they were working on it, little flakes would fall out, leaving an imperfection on the marble. When that would happen, they would fill in that imperfection with wax. When they were selling their statues, their marble creations, they would advertise the more expensive statues as being without wax. So the sign would say, very expensive statue, sincera. It never flaked. It's not it's not covered over, or substituted by wax in the place of the flake. So sincere means without foreign ingredients. Sincere means this is really me. I'm not putting on any airs, and I'm not being dishonest or disingenuous. I think the same thing is true with innocent. Innocent means without need for repair. People think that if you lose your innocence, you can repair it, but it'll never be the same. It will be wax. And then the innocence is not really complete. The Maccabee said, there's no need for wax. The essence of who we are has never flaked. It can't flake, and it therefore will never need to be filled in with wax. Just go for the original and unique Jewish concepts, and they do not need improvement. They don't need embellishment. They're sincere. They're without wax. That is the beauty of Hanukkah. That's the inspiration of Hanukkah. And when we do that, you get in touch with the original, indestructible values that we are embodied with. Of course, it'll last 8 days. It'll last 8 months. It'll last forever. That's the whole point of it. This is the real thing, and it's forever. All we needed was 8 days. But if we needed more, it would have lasted longer. Once you have the essential real thing, you never need to substitute or to embellish. It is real. So, join us on Hanukkah. Hanukkah has the power to elevate us, to make us a little more than human, to lift us above our merely human habits, and open up for us a world that is really infinite, endless, boundless, to infinity and beyond. So we'll see you all on Hanukkah, every night if you can, as many nights as you can. We'll be there. We'll be talking about the various profound lessons of Hanukkah, why oil, why 8 days, why in the doorway. Every one of those details adds another layer of meaning. So see you there. Thank you for listening. And Chag Sameach. Good night.